Hello, que hora? Good evening. I hope like we are online, you guys can hear. If you cannot, please just put like a comment on the chat. But we are here like live at Microsoft Auckland, and we have a session that's happening like with, I would say developers in the user group, and also like this is recorded as well. And tonight we're going to be talking about Azure Durable Functions. This is part one of. I'm just sharing like the other screen. Let me just come to that. Just a minute, and I should bring this one. Let me see if that's coming. I need to present my screen. Just a minute. All right. And this. Not this. Should be this. All right. So now this has been shared. And not sure like how familiar you are with Azure Functions, Durable Functions, but this is going to be a part one or part two. And we are going to do a mix of, understand the concepts behind it, and also doing coding demos, right? But before we start, I would like just to thank Will Veleda, because he's been helping us like organize the events. So just a round of applause to Will. Thank you, man. It's just like, you're an enabler. Yes. And yeah, I would like to thank you personally because of this happening, right? Otherwise, you'd just be online and we wouldn't meet face to face. So just to give like a little bit of me, so you guys, if you're following, well, in general, that's like, well, nothing has changed apart like me, like just joined Datacom. So I'm a practice lead at Datacom. And I'm a playground enthusiast, encoder, co-founder of Playgo Kids, and my technical blog is tech.playgokids.com. And a little bit like about the Code user group is that like we're a community of developers, right? And we focus like on best practices on how we we follow like the recommended best practices on software development languages, and we're developers. The intent of the user group is to enable developers with practical knowledge. So depending on where you are, as a junior to a lead dev, that's like the intent of the user group too, for people just to learn really, and be keen like to share. Yeah. And so with that, you launch like your career. We're part of Azure Tar, which is a cloud native group where we get to talk about like CNCF, right? The latest cool stuff happening on the cloud native space. Also a part of .NET Foundation, where like it's an entity that looks after the .NET projects, I would say open source projects. And tonight we're going to be very objective. And we're going to explore the concepts. We're going to identify what sort of patterns are available with Azure Durable Functions and demos. And we have like, I'm not going to go now to the patterns, but we're going to go from a development approach, how it works. So you have like a better understand when to use particular patterns. In general, like with Azure Durable Functions, you tend to explore the patterns because it gives you like the functionality and the use cases. So with that, you basically understand when to use those patterns. And with that, I think like customizing the durable functions becomes easier rather than just trying to use a user durable function without any context. So we're going to explore that, right? So Azure Durable Functions. Before we go to that, let's see the Azure Functions. Right? So if you don't know what Azure Function is, it's a serverless compute on Azure, right? It's a service available within Azure. We have like different billing plans in general, people tend to adopt consumption plan because you pay as you go, right? So you're just using computing hours, you pay for that. But there are other plans as well, like premium, even like dedicated. That's more, well, nowadays people tend to use more the premium because that's recommended, but they're dedicated for, I would say, the old app services that people still use. Event driven. So with Azure Functions, you have easier way to connect to different services on Azure and listen for events. So it's event driven. With that, you basically are not re-architecting or reinventing the wheel. Let's say if you're working for blob storage or HTTP triggers, or you work with queues, what happens is that like you can simply hook to those services and use just listening. What happened there? Something just triggered. So from a development perspective, people tend to do it, be more productive. And the integration itself, right, with the different Azure services, as I mentioned, so like blob storage, queue, service bus, there's a range of services that Azure Functions enable you to do integration with, right? So when we look like at this service, right? So you have like your code, so you create like your implementation, and you basically have bindings. Those bindings we're calling here as events. So they get triggered and they action your code. With that, we have like that's overall how an Azure function works. With the durable functions, right? Durable function is an extension of the Azure function. So, well, it's basically the same, but there's more to it. The main difference is that it's stateful. With the Azure functions, it's stateless by default. So what you want is that like focus on Azure Durable Functions when you need to preserve state. It's also part of the serverless computing within Azure. One of the things in here is that I don't know like how familiar you guys are with Azure Functions, but Azure Functions are an evolution of the old web what was web jobs. So there was like web jobs before, like when people were using like app services, right? But the durable function is an evolution of this durable task framework, which is an open source project, but Microsoft has like used that one as the baseline and created this whole ecosystem on top of it. And there are different, I support different programming languages, right? 5 of them. So we have like C#, we have JavaScript, we have PowerShell, we have Python, and we have Java support. So there's a range of languages that are supported on durable functions. And when we look like in more details, how the Azure Durable Functions work, we need to look like the individual pieces, right? Because it's not like it's not the same as the Azure function. Because well, we have the code, but there are different responsibilities. The first one, so we have those client functions. They are the starters. So basically, they trigger the process to happen. With that, we have orchestrator functions. This one is a special case because what happens is that on their orchestrator, we have the implementation of the stateful implementation. Right? And for these different tasks that are performed, we have the activity functions. We call it activity because they are independent and they do the tasks that need to be executed. Well, in terms of states, we call it the storage as a task hub, right? So that's the one, you're always going to see that the durable function, you have like an Azure function with states hooked up and connected together. If we are to, this is a link of the major components of durable functions, so you guys can see it. But like exploring more details, the orchestrators, right? What makes the orchestrator like so special is that like it's based on event source design pattern. So with this design pattern, it's what basically happens. It enables events to be stored in a full series of events to be stored in a append-only store. Basically, you're just stamping states one after the other. So what that enables you is that you have the full history of the states that are happening on the solution. And depending how this one is used, this can be on cache. So you have the full state. So that's what the event sourcing allows you to do, to have the full series of events stored. You're gonna notice during like the debugging, the demo, we have this replay behavior because the orchestrator itself, when it triggers, is gonna trigger like the breakpoints. You're gonna see that it calls every single time. However, it's only going to call it the one that's the next step. It seems like weird, but that's the replay behavior. I can show you like more like during the demo. It needs to be deterministic. What it means is that we need to have like the same results every single time. Because imagine, right? So we have like a full-time series. Let's say you're during like your context of your durable function, you're depending on a date time. You don't want that date time to change all the time, right? So you want to preserve that. So it needs to be the same. So that's how we call it. It needs to be deterministic. There are some code constraints with that because it's not simply like there are some rules you need to follow. Otherwise, you may be violating those the deterministic approach. So those constraints are available like on this link. So that's recorded and you can check like this one later. But it's basically that. We need to have like the same results every single time. In the Task Hub, it's also like important to understand what it does. But if you're looking here, like we're grabbing just a snapshot of a storage, right? And we have like blob containers, queues, and tables. Well, that's the same storage that we use as the function, right? But the durable function has its own control over like what's available in there. So if you're looking here, so we have like work items. So the work items are created just to trigger for the triggering the action, the activity functions. Imagine, right? So we were an orchestrator, we're gonna query or enable every single activity. So those are pushed onto those queues. We have the control. That's the one that's responsible for triggering the orchestrator itself. We have like another concept called entity function, which is, I'm going to approach like in another slide, but like it serves for both. Tables as well. So you can see like we have the history and the instances, right? So those are like the events recorded, orchestrators, and we have the statuses available in there. On blob containers, right? So imagine every single activity function query a blob, for example. So we need to Azure, the durable function deals with those leases, right? So there's like it has its own control over the leases to access the blobs. That's basically what we have like in here. That's something that in general we don't touch, but it's important to be aware that that's where the state gets recorded. Although this is the default, right? In general, we tend to use blob storage, but we can use a SQL server, we can use other things. But for these demos here, we're going to be exploring the Azure storage. That's the link that contains the more details about the task hubs. Entity functions. It's well, it's considered to be like as a durable function. However, the label is different, right? We're calling like as durable entities. And what they do is that imagine you have like some sort of counter, right? So the state changes and increments or updates your state. So imagine you have like multiple services square in that one. So we're going to have like a durable entity that gets preserved. We call it like there are triggers for that. We call it as entity triggers. I think it's something you need just to see how it works to understand how they get triggered. That's something that we're not gonna explore on tonight. Although, like if we have like time, we could do it. That would be like part 2. So that's why we have lots going on here. Having like one single session would be difficult to cover. Important to notice that entity functions are only available on Azure Durable Functions version 2 onwards, not on version 1. And it's only supported on .NET, JavaScript, and Python. So depending on technologies, languages you're adopting, I think this one is something you need to consider. Right. Then we're going to jump now like basically to every single pattern, but I'd like to show like the first one. So we have like the chaining. Well, I'm gonna bring all of the patterns, right? So we have the chaining pattern, fan out, fan in, async HTTP APIs, monitor, human interaction, and aggregator. All right, so we have like different patterns for different behaviors, common behaviors. So that's why they became patterns. And they tell a lot. Like by only learning those patterns, you know when to apply durable functions. We're going to explore in here, like tonight, chaining, fan out, fan in, the async HTTP APIs. In the other 3, we're going to explore the other meetup. So when jumping like to the chaining pattern, so basically that's the idea is that we have like a chain of actions happening sequentially, right? So you can see here, and that's the link for the article available. With that, I'm gonna jump like to code. I think I talked too much, but that was important for the recording. And when you jump to that, if you are keen, you have some context on it. What I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna open here my Visual Studio. And I have the chaining pattern in here. And when it loads, I'd like to show like the tooling as well, because it's not no studio, but there are ways for better understand how things work. Right? I have a studio here. I have Visual Studio Codes as well. One of the I found like interesting, like nice to have like this sort of tool called Durable Function Monitor. So if I come in here, extensions. All right, so let me zoom in here. Let me just search in here. Durable. So let me put in here, right? That's a tooling that came up like at the beginning of the year. And what it tries to fulfill is there like a visual representation or a graphical representation of how durable functions work. It's important one. I recommend like to install it so you have like a better understanding of when you need to troubleshoot, right? Because what happens, this is with Azure durable functions and functions, it's code. Well, it's driven by code, right? So you control what you're implementing. So for you to have like understanding of things were triggered or a visual representation, this extension is awesome. Right. In general, like when you install it, it comes like under the Azure tab and it gets displayed in here, right? So, and then you can see like the storage. If you are like on Azure, you can see like the the storage in here. This is my one local. I'm going to use that. But before, I think like before I get to demo the code itself, I can show like a demo or a previous execution, and then you can see, all right, that's how it gets displayed. Let me just see if this one gets launched. Just like behind the scenes, right? I'm using Azure Write. I don't know if you guys know, but that's I think I'm gonna share my screen here just to show this one. It comes like with Visual Studio if you have installed. You can install like separately, but that's what's running at the moment in here in my tab. You don't need to understand this one, but that's running. So when I'm launching this, so you can see like a previous execution, something I did before. There was a chaining function. So you can see it just as hellos. I'm going to show like the demo. But what's interesting about here is that like you have a graphical representation of the execution. Right? So you could just come hook to a storage and see what happened. And you have like even like the graphical representation of the how long it took for the execution, right? It's pretty good. Depending like if you're executing things like all the time, you can see like things are refreshing here every 1 second. So you can see real-time information. I recommend getting this one as part of your tooling. And well, saying that, right, let's go like to the solution itself. So that's part of like of the articles that I shared on the presentation. But if you look in here, right, so that's the chaining pattern, well, the example, the demo. But we're gonna see, okay, we have like this startup. This is mainly, well, we're using dependency injection. So we have like a startup to hook a service. I'm gonna show it. But then we have like the orchestrator itself. Interesting is that like just the name. This is the starter. I just call it chaining, but that's basically the execution starts here. And then we have the activity. The activity does the single actions, right? If I come like to the startup, I mentioned about, well, in general, like good practices, you are going to leverage dependency injection on solutions. This one is a dummy order service. Right? What it does, F12, come on. It's not going, come on, go to definition. Well, we have like just actions in here happening where we initialize an order, or validating an order, processing an order, and save an order. Those are activities that are going to be called by the durable function. So this one is available as a part of the service, right? We have the order itself, which is the object that we have in here, just like a plain object. And before like it gets triggered, right? So we have like the starter. This is the starter. So if you look in here, you're gonna see that the starters, they have like this, use these clients, durable orchestrator client. And what the starter is just going to call it is just, okay, call me the orchestrator, trigger the orchestrator. And by the end, it just returns a response. But the magic comes in here within the orchestrator. So if I come to the orchestrator itself, I put breakpoints, so we're gonna demo, but I just grabbing, okay, as an input, the order that came up from the starter. You can see here that it changes. We're calling like the orchestration context, right? That one that's, well, that's the one that's where the event sourcing, it works behind the scenes. So that's the implementation we have behind the scenes. But that's the chaining. So one is going to be called after the other, because initialize the order, validate the order, process, and save. In the end, we have some outputs. So if I am to, well, the activities, what they're doing is basically calling the order service to do the job. Right? Initialize calls initialize the order. Validate the order, it basically just more like a proxy, but they can be called multiple times depending on how many uh, functions or how, depending on how the context is calling them. Let me just trigger that so we can debug and understand how it works. We're gonna notice the replay behavior because that's how things work on the orchestrator. So this is going to be launched, and then on the starter, if I'm not wrong, we have a HTTP trigger. Right? So imagine, okay, I can trigger this one. That's the event binding. We're going to be listening to a HTTP trigger in there as soon as it launches. But it could be a queue trigger, it could be another sort of trigger, that a block trigger. It just depends on your need. Right? So we have this one, the chaining starts. I didn't restrict, like could be a get or a post. In here, this one. So I had like previously executed, but basically what I have in here is a post where I'm pushing this body, right, of a product with a quantity. As soon as I trigger that, so we're gonna have like our hook on Visual Studio, and we should be able to see in troubleshoot, right, by seeing like the breakpoints. So let's just see that one getting triggered. Yep.
So is the post calling one of the API or just starts the other HTTP service?
Correct. Yeah. So the question was there like that the postman is making the request call to this endpoint. Yes. Because like what we have in here on the starter chaining, you can see here that's HTTP trigger. Right? So this one creates this endpoint for me. So let's see. Things are take a little bit more time. And let me see here. Well, things are getting triggered. Maybe it's just really slow. But like what should happen is that we should be able to see the endpoints getting triggered in here. And then we should be able to break points and go like through the code. So, well, let's see. I think it's really sluggish. Okay, things are getting triggered. Yeah, so you should trigger this one automatically. Like, so things are still running, but it's not coming really. Let me try like again. Should be really quick. Let's see. Oh, we got it. It was really sluggish. Maybe internet connectivity. Yeah, could be that. So yeah, so that's the start, right? What it does is just receives the trigger and gives back a response, even without finalizing the execution, right? Because what it does, it provides a context or endpoints for you to query that is used by other patterns. But you're gonna see here, right? So it got to that point, and then look, like we got endpoints in here. I'm not talking about that now, but those endpoints are really useful for querying and getting states of execution, right? And now we came up like to the orchestrator. The orchestrator itself is grabbing the order, right? F10 in here. When it does, right? So which came up from, well, just the product SKU and the quantity. And now it's gonna trigger every single activity. right? So it's gonna come like, well, it call like the activity is gonna call the order service. And then like, wow, what happened? Like it came back to the top. That's the replay behavior. Because what is gonna happen now, is that like it's gonna trigger again? No, it's gonna call only the second one. So it's gonna call like now is the second step. And then, well, it's returning those values in here. I think the focus is there like, okay, I want to show the replay behavior. And they're like, oh, Square Engine again. And then it's gonna call the third one. The third one, process order. It's gonna call like the service and then like comes back again. That's the replay behavior. It has like preserved the state. It's gonna call only the activity function that wasn't executed. So now it's saving the order. Right? We got like an idea here. Right? It's hard coded, but you can see here, and then it's gonna return the outputs. Right? Because now it has finished. So we've done the chain. Those are the outputs that we got. Well, first of all, we initialize the order. We got the order number. Second, we validate the order. I think like this one is just like an output for the quantity. Then we process the order. We got like a stamp of the date time. Maybe just to, yeah, I'm not going to be able to focus in here, but in here you can see. And the third one would be the saving the order and generating an ID. That's what we get, right? And with that, it's gonna be finished. But what you can see here is that, let me zoom in. Well, so it shows like the steps just printed, right? So first the trigger happened, then it started executing the orchestrator. It has initialized the order. Then it came back to the orchestrator, right? So we got to finalize the order, came back to orchestrator. Then it went to the validation order, went back to the orchestrator. It processed the order. It went back to the orchestrator and then saved the order. And at last step, it did the outputs, right? So that's how it works. That's the replay behavior. It can be confusing, but if you know like how things are implemented, the pattern, you see that things go and happen like in a sequence, right? That's the chain pattern. What I'd like to show next, let's go back to the presentation. When I share and display duplicates. All right, so we explore that. Second one, fan out, fan in. I'm gonna show like we have like this starter where things happen. Let's say you know that you have like a big processing, like let's say you have a billing and you have like a number of orders, let's say 100,000 orders. You're gonna load up like those orders, let's say function one. And for every single order, you're gonna spin a billing. Bum, 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 bum. It's gonna happen like in parallel. So Azure is gonna scale that one for you. In the end, let's say you want to consolidate. Okay, cool. Things have been processed successfully. You finalize the process. So that's the fan out, fan in, because it expands the level of processing for the different activity functions. In the end, it goes back to the results, like let's say the output. This is the article that we have available that contains the example and the demo. And I'm gonna jump to the codes as well. So let me close that one. And let's go to fan out, fan in. Well, similar as what we had. All right, we have the order service, okay? This is the startup, which is the dependency injection part. The starter itself, I called fan out, fan in. So that's the first piece. After that, it triggers the orchestrator, and the orchestrator is going to call the activity individually. So if we were a startup, just to show, That's the order service. Let me pull like a bit more here. That's the dependency injection. Then we have the starter. Again, this one is the HTTP trigger. Right? So we have the clients, orchestration clients as the starter. For this one, well, it's doing similarly as before, as the chain pattern. So it's just triggering the orchestrator to do some job. Right? We could pass variables from here if you need like that sort of payload. We could use in there. It's not the case in here, but you can. And then it's gonna call the orchestrator. Right? It's interesting here because now let's say you have like this whole payload of orders. Right? We're grabbing first step, right? The orchestrator, we're grabbing all the orders. Get all orders. That's basically what I have like in the order service. For each order, we're gonna call another, we're gonna trigger activity to do the processing and process the order. And in the end, we wait. So we can see this one task when all. When we have like a result of all order processing tasks, cool, let's grab like what's the order numbers that were created. And let's send like a notification, right? That things have been processed. When I look at the activity, we're gonna see that, well, that's a dummy, right? That's grabbing the orders from order service, which is basically this. So we have hard coded, just for the sake of the demo, 5 orders. And then we have the processing, right? And then we process the order. Processing the order does basically nothing much, but for the sake of the demo, we're just returning the order number. Send notification as well, like it's just open. You could integrate with another service to do send email, a message, whatever. That's what we have in here. And with that, I think like we can jump to the demo here. Let me just start that one. Hopefully now that goes a little bit faster. Let's see. But we're gonna get like the same HTTP endpoint, and we should be able just to use Postman to trigger the execution. So this one, 771, fan out, fan in HTTP start. Apparently has raised, all good. So let's see this one. And this. Well, we don't have like much on this. We're just a trigger. We're not accepting anything, but just getting like a more like a job to be run. Just for the demo. It could be like a cron job. Right? Let's say you do processing, billing processing happening early mornings, 2 a.m., something like that. That would be an example. So let's trigger that. Oh, it happened. It happened like so fast. So what happened here is that like we had like the call, all of the processing orders. So we should have like things in here happening. And in the end, we got like, it's gonna wait for all of them. Let's see. I think it's gonna call now, all of them. Yes, it is doing that. That's a replay behavior. So for each single execution, it grabbed like all of them here. 1, 2, not like because it's parallel, things are happening not in sequence, right? So you are spinning multiple multiple functions to run that for us, but they don't happen in a sequence. So you can see here that things were processed, right? But the sequence is different. But after that gets triggered, right? So it waits, and we should have the notification endpoints when that finishes. Let's see if something is happening. Probably not. But I should have in here the endpoints. Did it finish? Still executing. So something's happening. But we should have like the endpoint finalized. Apparently there's still things happening. Yeah, things are still happening. I'm just looking at Azure Right, so I can see that it's dealing with the leases. That's Azure the Durable Function handling that. But interesting that still didn't come. So let's see when it finishes. But you guys like I don't know like how long this is gonna take. Could be internet connectivity as well, but yeah, it should finalize. But this one is still executing. Come on, still doing its thing. Come on, yeah. But yeah, I think like that's a pretty good pattern where like you use in general like for timer jobs, like cron jobs. I think like if you have multiple processing, parallel processing, that's the pattern to use. And you can just visualize that in your business, depending like on the need. That one could be a pattern to use. I'm going to stop this one, to be honest. I don't know why it's taking like that long, but still things are executing. It's just, I think it's really sluggish. But okay, so that's the fan out, fan in. Let's go to another one. Let's go back to the presentation. Duplicate the slideshow. All right, so you could see that we grabbed all the orders. We trigger the multiple activities. They run in parallel, right? In the end, we would be sending a notification. Somehow things were just hanging here, but that should be triggered. That's the pattern. We have the async HTTP API pattern as well. This one, well, it's part of the Azure function, like the durable function, because what happens is that imagine that you have like a processing and you need to provide some endpoints for you to be able to query, right? So for this one, so we have like a process that has started. We're saving the state, right? Something's happening and it's recording the state. But while things are happening, we could have like another service just making requests and pinging. What's the state? What's the state? Right? Just to get the status. And this is already implemented on Azure on Durable Functions. So this is the example, right? That's on the link. But what I showed in here before, right? What we get from here is that we are able to query those endpoints. Right? So we can have, maybe if I zoom in. So we have, let me just expand a little bit more. So with this pattern, what happens is that, okay, we need to provide endpoints for query. Azure Durable Functions do that for you already. So we can just come and query and retrieve the status. There are other endpoints, right? So the purpose of the pattern is just to query, obtain like the results in real time, because you can do that. So these would be the endpoints that we could just leverage. Let me grab the other example, which is a simple one. It's just like the out of the box, basically, just like for demonstration purpose. Well, when you create like a new Azure Durable Function, that's what you get in here. Nothing much. But you're seeing like in other projects, we have like more implementation, right? Well, aligned to best practices. This one is just a demo. So I didn't put like anything around it because I want just to retrieve those endpoints. Right. So if you look in here, everything is there. By default, you create the demo. You can see here that's the hello chain example. Right? Where I have like Tokyo, say hello, Seattle, say hello, London. But it's basically, we have the context. So the context is the orchestrator, right? This is the trigger. No, this is the activity. The client, this is the starter. So we have the starter, we have the context, the orchestrator, and we have the activity. If I am to trigger this one, so hopefully things work well. We don't have like any other garbage from the previous execution. And as soon as that like runs, well, we're going to have an HTTP endpoint. We'll be able to query that endpoint, and we're going to get like those, the payloads, right, as the answer. And then we can grab that API endpoint and make it another request. Let's see what happens in here. Yeah, it's trying to, it's still launching. Come on. Let me do something here. I've seen this one before. I'm gonna kill Azure Write. In general, like because I have Visual Studio installed, Azure Write is part of one of the folders within the Visual Studio installation. I'm just manually triggering this one. It's gonna raise those port numbers. What I want to do is to trigger this one and see if that's gonna go faster. Let's see. Yeah. Because yeah, I just would like to show like what would be the endpoint results, right, that we would get by querying the status. Because we're gonna see like, okay, still running, done. So if you have like any sort of monitoring out of just watching the execution, you would be able to query and have like maybe a real-time information. So let's see. Well, while it loads, I'm not gonna make like any changes, but we talked about the task hub, right? So the task hub is the one that we have available in here. But what if we want to specify another task hub? Right? Well, you can. This one like that came up by default. It's called like task hub. What we could do, we could, well, still trying to launch, but we could specify, okay, I want to use a different task hub. Same storage, a different task hub. You can do it, although, well, I'll say for local development, I think like it's okay, because then you want to test different workflows and see what belongs to each one. In production, we recommend to split those storages, right? You don't want to mix information from another workflow onto an existing one. It will be like confusing. And with that, well, we could change. There's like this file called host.json, right? So with host.json is where it's basically how you say to the service on how to behave, like some configuration settings that is specifying here. In here, I have like basically logging. If I were to modify this one to say I want to use a separate hub, I have like a mini demo here, but what I would need to do, like there's like these extensions in here. I could just come and do it like use like my demo hub, for example. So with that, when I'm not saving, because it's still all the other process in there, but if I was to retrigger this function and rerun, the states would be saved onto this new hub. Apparently, it doesn't want to work, eh? Why not? Why it's taking like that long? Let me try like this one. I'm going to start again with a new hub. Let's see if that's the culprit or something's really going on here. Okay. Oh, it's triggering. I reckon like something got stuck on the previous execution there that was still hanging, because what happens is that the states are going to be saved in there, and the binaries I'm gonna try to launch, because we're using the same hub. I think it will be the task hub itself would be the problem. Let's just see, because like there will be garbage in there for other executions. Maybe that's what was hanging. Yeah. I think like it takes like few more seconds. I'm just gonna stop this one. And you guys gonna trust me. What I'm saying is that like that's what we're gonna get, right? I just see. It doesn't seem to be the case. I don't want to hold you guys.
Could you try press Control C?
What's that?
Control C.
Control?
C.
Feed?
Feed.
Ah. Control V?
C.
C? Yeah, I just stopped. All right, Control C. I did that. Interesting. Well, that seems to be the case. How did you know about that one?
It was
Just like hanging, like the cursor in there?
Yeah.
Okay, that was it then. Thank you. So I just like the cursor that was hanging. So we have like this endpoint. And well, right now it has finished. Did it or not? Don't know. I didn't put like a breakpoint in here. But yeah, that one was executed. Yes. So things were triggered, right? But if I come in here and try to reload that, two task hubs, right? Two task hubs. And now we have the My Demo hub, right? So that one got created in here, which is good because then you can have like a better control. Even like, not sure if you guys have used the Storage Explorer. It's a pretty good tool that you can just visualize what's happening, right? If you want to have, but you can see here that things now have doubled because I had Task Hub and now I have My Demo hub, right? I think with that, we're nearly to the end of the session, at least part one. We're going to have like part two is going to be a continuation of that. There are other patterns. I think like my intent in here is just to give you guys like some awareness of what you can do with durable functions. And then from here, just playing, right? Like maybe they're like a business case or scenario at work that fits that. And you are, as a developer, perhaps like suitable for the business. You could use like the service, right? So I think with that, any questions? I don't know if like we have questions in here or on the chat. Let's see, just a minute. And let me just stop sharing for now. This one. All right, let me just come back to that. Yeah, we have like spanning here. But no, it seems like the questions asked were like here in person. But I'd like to thank you guys. This is going to be recorded. You can always visit this recording session. And then from here, we can just, let me put like full screen. So from here, we just finishing. And I hope to see you guys in a couple weeks. In a couple weeks, we have the second session. Right? So yeah, and I would like to invite you guys to come. If you have something, some content that's, well, maybe like you're doing on daily basis, right? Something it's you know really well, but perhaps like maybe you're bored because okay, you're always doing that. But for other developers, could be something really cool to share. And it doesn't need, you don't need to have like a full hour to show. It could be like 15-minute session. We could like split and have like different sessions just to talk about a particular topic. And maybe if people are interested, we could just explore that in more details. I think this is my invite. If you guys want just to keep in touch, yeah, hook like to the subscribe to the session and on the channel. And yeah, see you guys next. Cool. Thank you. And with that, I'm just finishing here online and see you guys next time.